Hi, I'm David Mance, and my guest today is Marcus Williamson. Marcus is founder at Elyndra, an AI-powered platform delivering solutions for children's residential care. Marcus also has various fingers in various other fascinating pies, including recruiting for complex care, investing, family, a kind of great family history, working in working care homes. So I reckon this is going to be a good one. Marcus, welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Cool. I first came across you on LinkedIn. I'm slowly sort of warming now to LinkedIn. Now I'm finding kind of more, I don't know, just more fun and interesting people on there. And you're definitely one of those. And yeah, I came across you when someone had asked a question about how would you spend 10 million pounds to improve the sector, and you had I thought a really interesting answer. Do you want to just go into that a little bit?
Yeah, and also I think it's interesting when you talk about LinkedIn. I think it's a weird and wonderful place, but I definitely try and add to the excitement of it. I try to cover sort of topics, what's going on from a different perspective. But yeah, the thing on reinventing care, um, I think as a tech founder, you would think it would be throw the money at tech, and obviously I obviously give the alternative answer, which is not tech at all. It's actually a Netflix documentary, specifically what we saw for, say, Formula One with the Drive to Survive, how that brought people who really didn't care for the space into it, and not only into it, but actually they were now behind it, really curious about what goes on, even down to like the vehicles, the psychology. And it's like, well, you know what? We can really capture the minds of people, help them understand, have empathy towards the sector, and that in turn has a lot of knock-on impacts which go far beyond touching the primary sort of audience, but actually the knock-ons
Yes.
of maybe people are considering a career if they're on the fence, they've come across that. So yeah, I think you can have huge influence in this day and age by getting the right message in front of people.
Yeah, it's such an important way to think about it because yeah, like that the power of a narrative and like when folks e even like taking it down to sort of getting behind a team, like that's kind of what I guess Drive to Survive is. My parents are mad about it, but yeah, just getting under the skin of an organization and a team and feeling something for those people, and then yeah, like you're saying, like getting into some of kind of less expected sort of stories within care. Like the more you look into it, the more you're sort of seeing uh, all kinds of like challenges and pressures that folks are under, but then the ways that they're finding to sort of deal with those. Yeah, there's so much there, but I think we should make it. I don't know if we've got an investor out there who's interested.
Someone fancies a different type of sort of series to make for Netflix. Appreciate it's very
Yeah,
specific, but it would do wonders for the sector. And I think, as you're saying, like it's the highs and lows of space that so few people
yeah,
understand, but behind the scenes it supports so many vulnerable people. And I always talk about social care as it touches people across their whole life. You know, some people will be known from when they were very young until, day they die, they'll be known to the sector and supported
yes,
by it. It's not always as obvious and as almost discreet as you go into hospital because you've got a broken bone and you have a surgery and you hope to not come back again. Social care is supporting you all along the way. So there's definitely a lot of emotive. It's a very human space as well, and I feel hence that kind of following a human journey and feeling the feelings of the ups and downs.
yeah,
Children's services 1 minute it can be absolute crisis. Next minute you're going to Alton Towers, supporting a young person first time they've ever been on a big ride, and it's a real journey. It's a real experience, and so few people understand. Even when I tell them what we do at Linda and who we support, they still don't even realize that that's a thing. So yeah,
Linda is about. You've got investors. Um, like, do you ever do stuff like that where you have folks investing actually kind of involved, like meeting folks on the front line?
I think it's a difficult one because it's such a protected sector in terms of who can go near children's services, even down to the fact that the locations are obviously for clear reasons obscured. For us to even go anywhere near the data or the homes, we have to be sort of police checked and screened. But what we do is bring back the positive, and also the not always positive messages from the users, the customers, the people who are working with us of how they're actually finding it impacts their days. So if we put if we put a system in and they're now using it, and the feedback is the young person said to the staff member, why are you here? Like, why are you with me this evening? And they said, well, because I got my paperwork done, so I can sit with you and we can watch your series that you like, and it's the real human stories that help the investor connect and go, so you did this, which means that can happen. And I'm like, well, yeah, and that's also why they got in care, was so they could spend time supporting them and not be in the sort of cubbyhole office, like furiously typing away at
Yeah.
notes, at 10 p.m. at night. So we do try and bring everything back to stories of how it actually impacts real people in their day to day. And I think the thing is you always have to bring back what you're doing to what it means to a person. If it's a simple workflow or a thing they've got to do, a task in their day, an obstacle in their way, that's the only way we can really explain what we do to outside, whether it's investors or the regulator or, potential care home client.
Mhm.
You've just got to bring it back to what does it mean to you as a person? Forget the technical stuff. That's for us to think about. What does it mean for you? So, yeah, we always try and explain it that way.
Yeah. What's your story? Like, what's your own story in terms of how you found your way into this space? Because you've sort of been all over the place a bit career-wise.
Yeah, it's I thought I go right back to the start. I sort of did maths degree, focusing on data science. I ended up in finance because that was kind of the biggest data set that I could sort of get my hands on. I was there for a while, um, lots of complex derivatives options and all of that. But alongside that, my family have always been involved in care and specifically running care homes, and it's been complex adults and more recently complex children's homes. So me with my sort of data and maths hat on would often sort of come across what's going on in these services and be like, wow, this is a lot of heavy lifting, this is a lot of analysis, a lot of moving data points around. Then I'd also go, these data points aren't like our finance data. Um, they're a lot more like narratives. And I was like, well, we did a lot of work with sentiment analysis, entity extraction from news data for trading models and things. And I go, I was playing with stuff as I came out of uni, which then started to look an awful lot like what was going on with ChatGPT and the early, GPT transformer models and what they could do with text. And so I kind of put two and two together and go, you've got a lot of data and a lot of people trying to move that data from one format to another or just cross-check it. There is technology that can probably support with this. And so that's where that journey really began. And first and foremost, the thing which struck me was just how under pressure the homes were, my parents' homes in particular. There was a consistent shortage of the right people at the right time to support. Some of these things were recruitment challenges and awareness, which is a really big part that the sector still struggles with as well, hence why the documentary is needed. But also, when we had, like two deputies sat in an office alongside the manager, sort of beavering away to kind of move information from one side to the other, I was like, wow, this really could do with changing. Those people need to be freed up to support others, to run the teams, not to be admin clerks. So that's really how that ball started rolling for me. Like, this is under a lot of pressure. There's stuff that can help us do this. We must do this because it's such an important part of society that gets left behind. So yeah, that's when the mission
I
began.
really like that idea of, you come from that finance world, which is obviously plenty of resources there, and even like, yeah, some of those examples, like I don't completely understand them, but yeah, just interested, like what was it? So you're saying, so it'd be sentiment analysis, like presumably you're looking at like macro market factors and then how it's impacting that, and then go on, tell me a little bit more about just translating that into a care setting
All
if
right,
you can.
you've asked for it now. So I
Perfect.
used to play with a thing called an LDA model back in the day, where I scraped a load of history from the New York Times. I'd end up with a model which I could pass in things, which is like um, which of these entities are not alike, and you could give it like Barclays, Nomura, Goldman Sachs, and you give it Apple, and it'd be like Apple is the odd one out. And it's like, okay, this is interesting. So this is a model which is learned through news data the potential relationship between different entities to know that Apple is distinctly different from these three others. So you can kind of start building classifiers. So if there's a headline and there's sentiment associated with, there's a lot of, say, negative words. We maybe not understand the context in which the words are used, but they're negative words, and then it relates to an entity. It's like, okay, we can start scanning thousands of bits of information and pulling out some, at least some high level understandings of Apple is being mentioned a lot of times and it's being mentioned negatively. It's like, okay, well, that might be relevant to a decision we need to make in finance. But those models went on to become what we see now as sort of what's behind things like OpenAI's ChatGPT, which is they were really great for translation. They turn out they're quite helpful for certain things like generating text, summarizing text. But behind the scenes, there is this inadvertent ability to make sense of context and almost perform arithmetic with context. So if you're summarizing a note, then you've got 10 note summaries, and you say, I just want to know what is consistent or maybe different across all of these summaries. You've got something that does a fairly good job at pulling out the kind of things which are arising. And now when you're saying, here's a month worth of notes for a young person, or here's like 10 incidents, what are maybe common factors or common things which are going on? It would take a very long time for someone to not only pull up all that information, but read through it, but then actually come back and kind of take a step back and look at it. But when you've got a professional who knows what they're doing, as in they know the young people, they've been supporting them, they were there for most of those incidents, and you've got a computer that can kind of extract some of those high level takeaways, you bring them together and go, yes, that is what I've been feeling. Now I can see it. I can see where it's
Mm.
getting it from. That's where this beautiful merging of computer
Yes.
and expert comes together. Expert can't hold 80 notes in their mind, but they can look at a few takeaways and go, yeah, that feels about right. And I would probably say that about it. And it's the bullet points and the bits of information is what they need as professionals to go contact the social worker or the home manager if they're the deputy, and support the right changes in that care environment. So computer doesn't make a decision, the person is aided, but the two together are very effective. The extraction takes so much time, but with these models, is it one document? Is it 10,000 documents? It doesn't matter. It's computing power. So this is why, from what I saw in
Yeah.
finance, I saw in care, and I go, well, look, we could benefit from this.
I love that role that you're talking about, though, that expert role of someone who's seeing that data. Not only are they an expert in terms of, you talked about, oh, they're feeling something and then they're able to see the data that backs it up. They have that expertise in terms of where to take that next, like what they'll do about that. But I just think that's such an interesting facet which can get overlooked a little bit when we're talking about all the capabilities of AI. It's, yeah, it will produce this amazing stuff, but unless you know how to interpret it, even on a basic like marketing level, so a friend of mine sent, he'd got this marketing strategy from ChatGPT or whatever, and he sent it to me and he was like, what do you think of this? And I looked through it, I was like, yeah, like I can't find fault with it. Like it's really, really strong. But he didn't know that. And so unless you've got someone with the knowledge and the expertise, it still isn't, you kind of would be a bit blind. So yeah,
I
I think you've, yeah,
I totally agree with that, and I take it a step further, which is if someone had typed into ChatGPT, give me a marketing strategy which will cause my business to lose sales, it will come up with a plausible sounding method by which you could go out and do something that sounds productive but could hurt your business. And I think these things are very much what goes in and what comes out. Okay, if people are creating the notes that go in and someone is overseeing what comes out as a professional, we have a certain level of like checks and balances to that. It's still not perfect and there still will be mistakes along the way. But as you say, when you remove the professional from the loop, or what comes into the model is the output from something else which hasn't had oversight, you can end up with some pretty problematic situations. And I think I'm a little bit of a not a contrarian, but I try to be quite realistic about its place in the world. It's not a magic pill for everything, but what it does do is enable certain people to do some pretty heavy lifting in certain locations, or say you've got an inbox full of emails and you need to pull out the few which might relate to a topic. It can help with identifying certain bits of information, but it should be a step in the chain rather than the whole chain itself. Um, and I think we're going to see a bit like your sort of friend with the marketing plan. There is a few people will do these end to end without the professional involved, and they will find that there may be unintended consequences, which is something which the industry is going to learn. I have seen a CQC rating that's mentioned care plans being written with ChatGPT, and they found it as an inadequately sort of risk assessed process. So, we will go through this learning curve as a sector as well.
yeah, yeah. I mean, let's go into that a little bit, perhaps. Like, are there? I guess probably you hadn't particularly come across those for yourself, those sort of scenarios, but just thinking about, yeah, how AI is used. I suppose there's a number of like pitfalls that providers can fall into. So one is like saying, don't use AI. Like no one use AI.
Yeah. That
And then another is like, yeah, feel free, guys, go for it. Like, yeah, do you want to say a bit?
Yeah, I think I'll give you a word. Sounds really mysterious. Shadow AI usage. Um, it's pretty much people they're just using it because they have the ability to use it and they're told not to, but they still do. And it's a bit like if you've got a calculator on your desk and you're told not to use a calculator and add it up in your head, you're still going to reach for the calculator. Now, we have the ability to create potentially more monitored and specific solutions to that, where providers can have their own version of a ChatGPT, where we are sort of adhering to the Data Protection Act and we can consider what goes in and what goes out and keep oversight of that. And that is a far safer way than just saying blanket no. And then, as you rightly say, on the other end of the spectrum, we have providers that are going, let's throw it at everything. And then that's where it can get a bit unruly because if you're not risk assessing, you've not got the right data protection impact agreements, we're ending up in a situation where people are copying and pasting information into certain tools in certain ways where the consequences are not fully understood, the cross-pollination of what's going where, who can see that isn't sort of really being contemplated. And that's where fast forward further down the line, by the nature of the sector, a lot of information is ultimately stored for future future use or for archives. People will be able to go back through and say, you were putting this in there and we can see that, and that in hindsight wasn't the right thing to do and you're in trouble. So yeah, we do need to strike a balance where it's don't try and say no to everything. Don't say let's just throw it at everything. Let's think about specific use cases. Let's risk assess it. Let's get the right plans around what we do. Let's support people with the right training so they at least have that level of literacy understanding. It's not a Google search, but also just like you shouldn't send stuff to your personal email, it kind of sits in the middle there. Keep revisiting that because it's an evolving space. But I think the most dangerous thing a provider can do is just say, don't use it, because chances are they still are, and you just don't know about it.
Yeah. And I think also where we're at just in that whole cycle of like early adoption, late all that stuff is, I think we're probably not, if you think about like most of the folks that would work in care, probably when we're not, we've only just getting going sort of thing in terms of how folks are likely to be reaching for AI. Like it's going to get more and more, I would have thought. Well,
I'd agree with you.
let's uh let's go positive for a moment. Let's talk a little bit about Elyndra, and I'm just interested to hear, like you already kind of hinted at does a bit, but tell us a bit more about it, and particularly perhaps a little bit more in terms of the impact, a couple of examples of the impact that you see it having.
Absolutely. I think just sort of almost building on what I've said at the past and how we've got to where we are today, and me as well, my own personal journey. Um, Elyndra really is looking to build that operational spine for the sector, and I mean that through what data is used by which professionals to achieve what outcomes. And I think maybe even when we started, we thought it was more of like there's a killer solution to a killer problem type thing. I think the reality is of a fragmented, challenging sector is there isn't magic pills really in this space. There's a lot of people doing a lot of great work, but struggling with a number of different workflows. Um, our big focus at the moment is around referrals and the beginning of a journey of a child in care with a care provider, and even just getting matching right. There's been a pretty large influx in providers now coming to market and opening up homes. But there's still a large number of young people around in an illegal placements and not finding the right matches. It's a really, really messy process. And so we're trying to put handles on things so providers can actually wrangle with all the data that they're dealing with and actually start making informed decisions and being able to evidence that to the regulator so that they're not getting shut down for the wrong young people being placed together. Zooming out, we are also developing sort of care management systems to sit in children's services. And again, the focus is around those audit trails, how really to keep providers on the right side of regulation, because I think people there fundamentally want to do good, and every day is so different and so challenging. What's hard is to show everyone that's watching on and waiting for you to falter to see all of the work that you've done, everything from the fact that you have requested the handyman to fix that hole in the wall, everything from we didn't call the on-call for this reason, but where was that comment or where was that sort of acknowledgement of that? Because all we see is that you didn't do it. And it's really hard, and it almost feels sometimes that we're tripping up people in this sector who are under so much pressure. But I really think we need to rethink the workflows and the processes. And I think AI can help with some really good heavy lifting around what has been done, high level summaries, takeaways, matching and pulling things together. But at the core of it, it's helping people get through their days. So Elyndra has evolved over the last sort of 6 months. Referrals is very much where we're starting, but this broader operational workflow and sort of spine to the sector is really where we're going to be ending up.
Hmm. Just something that, yeah, really struck a chord with me as you're talking. Just folks, almost, yeah, like not having records of things that they did right, but they don't have a record of it. And something that isn't nothing to do with the care sector really, but there seems to be like an unevenness in how we look at different channels and different forms of communication. And so, and I don't know if it's just because of how long they've been around. Like people will record things in emails and it's completely fine. And when it's calls, like a video call like this and transcription and that being stored, that's not that's not being stored and not being um, recorded, and that's where people get tripped up. I wonder if, yeah, what you're trying to do is bring by bringing like a holistic solution into one provider, you're able to kind of, yeah, take out those blind spots and those gaps where folks can get trouble. Is that sort of where you're coming from?
We're looking at it sort of the other way around, which is I think right now a lot of systems are like, we've built you this great filing cabinet and now we're sort of sprinkling on some AI and bits and pieces to it. And I think what we're trying to look at is what do people actually need to do? What are the workflows involved? Where are those workflows currently failing them? And how do we present the right information to the right person at the right time? And a lot of this will be reverse engineering around some of the most challenging and legally risky parts of running a service. Just say it's a complex children's service, and there might be self-harm, absconding, all sorts of really sort of big challenges for many people. Some incidents can last 48 hours. How do we reverse engineer the whole process so that it is effortless and almost impossible to not collect all the facts along the way of who did what and when and how it was sort of carried out? And at the moment, what we have is we go, well, look, here's a great filing cabinet. Why don't you just throw everything on in there and hope at the end of the day it all kind of adds up and it will be your time and effort to kind of tie up those loose ends and spot all the gaps. We're kind of saying, well, why don't you flip it around the other way and make it like, well, here's a template where you need to fit everything into each slot along the way so that by the end of it, you know if you've missed something and the manager knows if you missed something. Everyone in the business is aware if there's something not there. So it doesn't need to be found out by Ofsted later that someone slipped their mind at 3 a.m. that they hadn't had a conversation with someone. And that is like a very different way of working. And there's no amount of retrospectively adding things to legacy systems that fix a fundamental workflow shift. So that is very much how we're thinking about that world, where it's less about tripping people up or hoping they can do the extra 9 yards when they're knackered, but more make it obvious where things haven't been completed and support them to get the wider access to resources in the business to make sure that's sort of followed up. It's a whole team effort. When things go wrong in care, it's a whole team effort to resolve because these are not trivial events.
How do you how do you find it like when you're first like introducing the systems with staff? Like what are the some of the conversations that you have? What are the kind of places where people push back or have like trust issues, I guess, with what you're saying?
Um, I think around some of the tools that we've got, people are using, there's a certain level of like, I do it my way, personalization, professional identity, how they might like to go about a process versus maybe how managers or more senior people in the business want it to be done. And I think we ultimately need to be careful that we're not seen as a tool for Big Brother, um, our way or the highway. Here's another tech provider putting in a system that's making our lives more difficult. They've had enough of that. So we have to be really careful about that. And that is partly a trust piece. It's how onboarding goes. It's how the education around that goes. And it does make it quite a big challenge, to get these things in place and get them going. It's one of the reasons why we're very much leading with referrals. Is it's something that there is no current real workflow for or solution for. So in some ways we can get going and we can build trust with providers before later coming to them and saying more of that great way of working can be seen across the remaining parts of your business. Once those children are in your homes, we'd love to support you through the whole time that they're there. So we're mindful that it's a progressive trust build. They've got some previous legacy of being burnt with, here's yet another install. I've heard providers that have mothballed things after 6 months, and the team's pulled from pillar to post going through that process to
Yeah.
end up going back to square one at the end of it. So I do feel for them.
Yeah, absolutely. What have you had any kind of like surprising real world impact that you've seen, like just with this referrals focus that you've got at the moment? Like, do you have some, I don't know, are there any like unexpected things that have come through that?
Um, I think unexpected would be, by being involved so closely with that process, we're realizing that these providers really want to do so much better for the young people they support. They're saying, can we use all, because we process all the referrals information. Um, we get a very clear view. If you've had some of our clients have 800 referrals a month. If the 800 referrals a month, where are they coming from? Who's sending them? Are they repeats? What are the primary needs? Where can they be? Where can't they be? So much learning from that. And they turn around and they go, how can we inform the training that we give our staff so that we are a more suitable receptacle for potentially these young person that is such a need? And it goes further as well. It's like, if we're opening a home, what should our statement of purpose be? What should the training be associated with that? And it allows them to react to what is the reality of what is currently happening, which is there are these patterns of young people with needs. Local authorities can't tell you because they can't see that information either. But again, comes back to the whole point of the tech that I spoke about. You zoom out on 800 referrals, and I can tell you in a single line, if you want to open a service that supports the bulk of these young people who currently need support, this would be the home and the associated training that allow you to support those young people. And I think that's what providers want to know. They want to be able to invest in a direction that supports the needs of the market, which, again, coming back to my finance world, you need to make a market. You need to have the supply match the demand. Otherwise, you've got young people in caravan sites and providers shutting homes. So
That's amazing though that you've got that kind of anecdote where you're able to pull that data that was coming in for a specific purpose and use it in all these other places, because what I think that's probably the biggest thing that will is hitting everyone across the board at the moment. It's like we're getting better at recording stuff, but we're not so good yet at like sharing it either within an organization or across organizations and agencies. And what do you think's going to have to happen to for that to improve?
what the sharing and communicating of data.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's quite a nuanced one because it depends in what format the information's collected, the kind of context around that, why we're collecting it. It doesn't kind of dictate where it goes into who. I think coming back and not sort of trying to blow my own trumpet here, but when we're trying to produce ways of having oversight over processes, and obviously, as we've said, we kind of reverse engineer it, so we're collecting the right information as we go. It then comes back to putting it in a view where it is very easy for lots of people who are interested parties, let's say, to have the clarity of what's going on, who is owning it, what stage they're at. Um, we do it in such a way that it's very hard for something to be missed. So it's like, if it exists, it's in this list. If there has been an incident across any of your homes, it's in this list. And then the accountability through who is on this step or who is assigned to this or who has been notified to do this. And again, it's that clarity to the person that's maybe having oversight of who is on this and has been assigned and has been notified. So they know if they need to pick up that phone, who are they calling? And they know that when they call them, that person has been notified. And so it's not oh, I didn't see, I didn't know. Again, we're not trying to be Big Brother, but when you say about information and sharing, it's not just the information, it's not just the onus on a single person or people to share. It's creating the almost like the lattice work in which that information sits and is pointing at a person or pointing at a step or it's the context that's really matters, and that happens even. It's even more important for people that are incredibly busy or tired or up at 3 in the morning. They shouldn't have to think hard about who needs to know about this or where should that go. It should be in the place it needs to be, and the other people that should be able to see it should be able to see it. So I like to try and
Yeah.
take the pressure off the person. The person's already moving mountains, supporting people.
Yeah. It's like it's such a high risk environment to be in, and it's, I guess like why, why do you want to be in this environment? Like, do you think there's a benefit to it beyond the altruistic stuff, like which is already coming through? But yeah, why here?
Why here? You're going quite deep on this now. Well, let's put it this way. Back in finance, I can do clever things for wealthy people to make things even better for people that've got a lot sorted, and that's cool and all, but it's also pretty boring. I like real challenges. I like problems that people don't want to look at either because they don't understand it or they can't solve it or some combination of the above. And that does come from a place of ego, I imagine. I want to solve challenging problems. It makes me feel good. At the same time, if I can hang my hat on something that can be both commercially successful and create enormous social value, I say, well, that's a pretty worthwhile thing to run at. Because even if I run at it and I don't make the impact that I wanted to make, at least I felt I threw my time at something that was worthwhile. And I always go back to the fact that if I was a young person that happened to be born into a situation which I didn't choose, I would really hope that if the world we're in, with the amount of technology and wealth and capable people, that someone would have taken the time to at least have a good shot at trying to improve their lives or specifically improve the lives of the people that are best placed to support them. Because I don't believe that technology can ever support vulnerable people directly. Maybe robotics for elderly care, but when it comes to emotional behavioral needs, you need people that have got the time and the pressure off of their shoulders to just give that child the kind of effectively the embrace they need and to hold on to them until they can come down. So someone's got to do it. I feel pretty well placed to do it. And I feel that if this is something that, a hill I'm going to die on, I think it's worth doing it. So I'm on a bit of a crusade for this.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's very cool. Do you have what's I guess the vision in terms of the next few years for you and Elyndra? Like, do you have that quite clear, or is it just the next task?
Well, I've got to both live sort of 3 months in the past, 5 years in the future, and also present day. It's kind of the role that I have. In terms of where we go next, um, continuing to roll out with new providers. We're really grateful to be talking to quite a few forward thinking people that are willing to try things out and see if things can be different. For the services and for the staff they support. Um, we're going to start talking to providers that are also in the US. I think this is one where a lot of the developed world struggles with many of the similar challenges that the UK has. There's a demographics piece there. There is a survival of children at birth. There's complication with mental health. There's a lot of things going on in this world, and I think it does reflect in that social care dynamic. We're also mindful that there are complex adult, there's fostering, there are a lot of parallels to this space, not even to mention SEN sort of education as well. So we'll take it step by step. Um, Children's care is very much our sort of main focus. But yeah, if we can create the sort of the clarity, the oversight and the accountability that's needed for people to be more effective in their roles, for less young people to come to harm and people to have a better sort of balance whilst working in this sector. And it'd be really helpful if someone could do that Netflix documentary as well. I think that would really help. Yeah, we'll continue to sort of spread what we're doing.
Fantastic. Um, let's let's move a little sideways because I'm not even sure if I mentioned it in the intro, but I know you do some work around recruitment and complex care recruitment. Just tell us a little bit again about that, like how you got into that and what I suppose your specific skill set is maybe bringing that's a bit different.
Absolutely. So this really occurred at the beginning of my journey working directly with care. So my folks sort of home was struggling in particular, like many do, with attracting and retaining the right staff. And that's really what brought me in to start really looking at what their days consist of. Because it's kind of like if you're helping place these managers and these support staff into homes. What do they actually do day to day? I obviously had a bit of an idea, but I didn't see what the actual paperwork and processes were. So that started out as something where it was my brother and I quite literally supporting my parents with their care home. And then that grew, and then we started supporting more different services, and then we started to really specialize. I guess I, in general, wasn't a huge fan of recruitment in its kind of sort of headhuntery sense of like, well, we'll take from here and we'll put there. And I'm not saying that's all of recruitment, but it was one where I felt my brother and I felt very compelled to actually try build the support packages around specific individuals that had really complicated needs, and ultimately it was kind of overlooked by many other services. So long story short, we ended up in the sort of case management space where someone had a catastrophic incident, and they now needed care for the rest of their lives. They needed someone that was into fell running between this certain age group, was this particular gender for various reasons. And again, this is where care gets a bit, grey edges, is you can't advertise for these things. You can't select people on these bases. But the reality is they have certain behavioral needs. They have certain needs that have arisen out of both their injury, their life before, their needs now. That means we have to do something which is very challenging, which is bring together a certain group of people that can meet their needs and give them the best possible life. So we ended up in a very specific part of care where people are incredibly thankful for the support in building these care teams, as opposed to begrudgingly sort of, I need staff, but I don't like the fact that I need staff, which obviously some of the sector feels. And yeah, that's continued to go from strength to strength, and we're really happy to be supporting a sector that there's a lot of catastrophic injury, brain injury, where it's very subtle. People's care needs, they may present completely normally, but actually have some very specific behavioural quirks that make it incredibly challenging for people that have worked in care to still work with their particular set of behaviours. And that's where it comes into a really thoughtful process of finding the right people, screening them the right way, helping them understand and sort of match on that front. And again, it reminds me of exactly what we do with Elyndra, which is there are certain challenges. We need the right information to make the right informed decisions, and we're bringing that together so that ultimately a decision can be made and the right support given. So yeah, lots of parallels, but in different ways, and just kind of further adds that piece of a deep involvement and positive intentions for this space.
Yeah. Wow. Is there? Can you say a little bit more about the? So you've got, yeah, you've understood their needs, and then you're starting to look at, yeah, finding the right. Like, can you just say a little bit more about how you would then go about? Um, I don't know, anything particularly you learned about how to do that actual recruitment process better, or how to, I guess, present the role, anything around there?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a pretty holistic process, and I think that's the thing which we do quite differently. Is we get a lot of background on the client, the person needing care, um, really like going into the hobbies, details, the interests. We then build these incredibly sort of colorful, almost pen portraits to not reveal personally identifying information, but to create enough so that people can understand like who this is that they potentially be supporting. We do a lot of research around what is the kind of going rate of pays in areas. So we make it so that things like pay is not an opportunity cost for someone to select this role over one just down the road. So we need to make it so that pay is not a factor in deciding if they want to work with this specific client versus any other role. So we have to kind of put a lot of factors in our favor, present someone clearly, give them that kind of almost realistic job preview. And then the process itself of actually sort of advertising it kind of goes down to the standard things of job boards, but it's really kind of working the algorithm to get as many eyeballs on. But then at that point, you have a few people that start self-selecting. You give them very specific questions to answer that reveal a lot about their true intentions. I always remember from, I guess, my tech hat, like the mum test. You ask questions in a certain way, so they don't give you the answer that you want to hear. They give you the answer that reveals how they truly operate in certain circumstances, and that's a really important one for us. We spend a lot of time thinking about the psychology, how things come across. For certain roles, we might use psychometric screeners. We're trying to understand their potential tendencies. Obviously, none of these things are perfect, but it just helps us paint this picture. We do
Yeah.
quite a lot of in-depth interviewing, sort of screening calls, in-depth interviewing. We really build out this profile, and then we present it back to the client or potentially the client supporting team, um, and sort of review. So it's quite an in-depth process, and a lot of it involves unpacking up front. What does this really mean? It's not like be here at this time to do this, boom, boom. This is what life feels like. They come into this knowing what is going to be involved here.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Are you still doing any of that work?
My brother does this day to day. I'm still involved with
Okay.
the business, but I guess I built a lot of that and the processes involved
Yeah.
with that. So I've been intimately involved in the creation of that from the start. But he continues to sort of take that from strength to strength, and I'm still a director there. So I still attend some of the
Okay.
sort of charity events and balls. So it's a pleasure to still be involved in that regard.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. So I guess just interested just to finish off around practical steps, um, particularly thinking about people really across the whole care sector who are really unsure where to even begin, if to be, if to, even they should be starting, bringing AI into any part of their service. Would you have any just words of advice for those folks?
So we're talking care providers that are considering how to use technology like AI in their service. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
perhaps there's a bit of a pressure. There's a lot of talk about it and a sense of I should be doing something.
I think I think the way that you should think about AI in care is it is a great door opener to discussions within a business of what do we currently do, what works for us, what doesn't work for us, and what we potentially could be doing better. And I think that's very much how we look at it as Elyndra. It's an opportunity to have open and honest discussions with businesses that may have been doing things for a certain number of years a specific way, and it maybe doesn't work for them. Um, you need to be very careful with providers that sell you magic pills and solutions to all problems because that is definitely not the case. And anyone that can't tell you sort of straight up front what the drawbacks are of what they offer for you, you should be very concerned. I think there are a number of flaws in all sorts of technologies. It's not a perfect thing by design. 2 plus 2 does not always equal 4 in this world of AI. Um, but I think if you listen to your team and what they get stuck on, what they spend time on, and then you go out and you start searching for solutions and you start talking to a number of providers that can offer them, it will reveal a lot more about how others are also solving solutions in this sector. And I think one of the greatest wins you can get here is understanding other case studies of success in the sector because although each service is different, there's certain parallels that will work. Um, I'm not going to sit here and say, look at our solutions and sort of take them up, but I think there are some really great case studies starting to emerge of how certain providers are using certain technologies, whether it's capturing things via voice and turning them into structured notes, so long as a person oversees them at the end and signs them off. That is a fantastic use case, and there's a number of providers leveraging that. I think one of the biggest things is probably bringing that shadow AI usage for people that are using ChatGPT on their personal devices, bringing that into the light by either an existing software that's being used that offers a similar capability, sort of bringing that in-house so it can all be kind of monitored and overseen, or finding a specific solution to how the team are using it. But the first thing is encouraging the team to speak up and say, hey, I have started using this for this. I found it really helpful for these reasons. And it's normally because some of the staff members might, dyspraxic, dyslexic, they really struggle with writing in English, but this allows them to explain what they're doing in a way that everyone can be happy with and they don't have to spend loads of time trying to, perfect their writing. So it's a nuanced one. And as you say, we're starting to get on this journey rather than we've seen this for a few years and have got maturity. So keep looking over your shoulder at what others are doing, keep looking at case studies, keep asking your team what they could potentially be doing differently, and then sort of go and have those conversations.
Yeah, I like the answer. And it's a great sector just in terms of folks are open. Your competitors are pretty cool about talking to you about what they're doing and sharing and what they've learned. So yeah, very good. Well, where can folks sort of find out more? Well, we touched on LinkedIn. Uh,
Yeah,
go on.
LinkedIn, you'll see some of my more controversial takes on AI. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, but I try and give the honest truth of risks and concerns. But also find us on www.elyndra.co.uk. You find our bits and pieces there. But I hope going forward I will be posting more about what we're up to specifically, just as things mature a bit more. We've got more
Yeah.
sort of good news to share and case studies. We'll hopefully do that. I think we're quite keen to share back. But as I said, look for case studies, how people are using it. We'd love to share how our clients are benefiting once we've had enough time to see that it's not a fluke, that this is durable. I think it's really important. Maths brain on here, statistical significance. But yeah, stay in touch on LinkedIn
Yeah,
and website.
yeah, definitely. I would definitely advise anyone to follow you on LinkedIn because yeah, there's some great chat there, some great thoughts across all sorts. And yeah, like I say, I do appreciate you on there because man, that place drives me a bit sometimes. And yeah, it's good to hear all the stuff you share. All right, that's it for today. I'm Dave Mance, founder of Frank Care Marketing, and I hope you join me again next time for AI in social care.